Let's get to the other big story today. Around 150 Indian citizens who are wanting to return to India and who were picked up by the Taliban and questioned this morning have been released and are now safely inside the Kabul airport. NDTV has learned that they're likely to be airlifted out of war-torn Afghanistan soon. Indian citizens waiting outside the Kabul airport for evacuation flights were taken to a nearby police station for questioning and checking of their travel documents, a top government source said. All of this amid some worrying reports from local Indian media that they had been abducted. The Taliban's picking up of these Indian citizens comes hours after an Air Force transport aircraft managed to evacuate around 85 Indians from Kabul earlier in the day. That plane landed safely in Tajikistan. Sources say, adding that a second aircraft is on standby in India. Chaotic scenes were seen at the Kabul airport on Friday night as US military personnel were seen trying to contain large crowds seeking a way out of Afghanistan. Thousands have been attempting to fly out of the country since the takeover by the Taliban, but first they have to get past insurgents, checkpoints, crushing crowds at the gates of the airport. Videos have emerged of the desperate situation outside the Kabul airport as people gather in the dark, pressed up against the barbed wire topped walls of the airport. Occasional streams of gunshots can be heard, and in an indication of the extent of the chaos, the Belgian Foreign Ministry confirmed that one of its aircraft took off from Kabul without a single passenger because those persons who were supposed to be on board got stuck outside the airport in the crowds gathered there. Well, joining us now is Amar Sinha, former ambassador to Afghanistan. Mr. Sinha, thank you for your time. An Indian Air Force rescue plane carrying 85 Indian citizens took off from Afghanistan on Saturday morning, but another 150 at least, that's at least what we know of, they are stranded at the Kabul airport. To say that this is a challenging, anxiety-ridden exercise would be an understatement. Could you give us a glimpse into just how challenging this is? You know, how much ever information you could share that's not sensitive, diplomatically, physically on the ground, etc. What does this entail?
Well, you see, first of all, I think the biggest challenge is not sending the aircraft. Biggest challenging is to collecting the people and getting them to the airport safely so that they have an access. And this drama or this unfortunate sort of delay that has been faced by these 150 people is basically because of that. There's lack of coordination on the ground right now. They don't know which airport entry to get in. The main Kabul airport entry, of course, is absolutely packed with people. And it is insecure. So obviously nobody will open. Americans are in control of the airport. They won't open it because they will see a huge surge of people getting in. So that is the real challenge. Second challenge, I think, is whether the Taliban commanders who are controlling the checkpoints on the road, and these are all Haqqani boys who have taken over Kabul security, I am told that they did not allow Hindus and Sikhs who are Afghan citizens. So that's how another delay took place, that they looked at all the documents and then only segregated the ones with Indian passports to come in, and part of it flew off in the morning, the other part are still stranded there. And they have been on the road literally since last midnight.
So it's not just the Indians who are at the airport, it's also Indians who may be in other parts of Afghanistan, you're saying, Ambassador. You know, details of this evacuation exercise, of course, very sparse, under tight wraps for operational and security reasons. But complicating matters is that the Afghanistan airspace is closed?
Afghan airspace is closed or controlled by Americans, but only for military operations, not for commercial air flights. So that's why our Air India, etc., cannot go. So there are no commercial airlines going there.
No, so that means then India would have to work on multiple fronts, right? Given that the Kabul airport is controlled by the US military, there's also diplomacy involved in bringing stranded Indian nationals back home?
Yes, everybody has to work with the US because they control the airport and the airspace for the time being. They are controlling the ATC, they are controlling the entry and exit points, and they are the ones who are slotting what time which aircraft can come.
So, because no commercial flights in the US, Kabul airport is in US hands.
Basically, yes, you have to work in sort of close cooperation with the Americans to get the slot also then fine-tune that your people who have to be evacuated reach the airport, and then they are allowed entry onto the tarmac and into the plane.
And Ambassador, India evacuated its envoys, diplomats, officials, security personnel and some nationals on aircraft on Monday and Tuesday, 2 days after Kabul fell to the Taliban, effectively, I think, closing our mission for just the second time since 1996 when this militant group captured power. Would that not also be a huge challenge? Because, I mean, if there's no Indian officials on the ground to oversee, to coordinate, to look out for Indian nationals, that must be complicating matters further.
Well, if you ask me, I would think yes, that's an added complication because it's very difficult to do these things remotely. But I believe that there are some local staff who are old hands, who have worked in an Indian embassy for a long time, who are trusted, who are well known locally. They are the ones who are managing this. They are coordinating with people, getting them to one place. And of course, we are working the channels from Delhi, I presume, both with Afghan important leaders who are in contact with the Taliban and people on the ground. So that's how it is happening. And besides, of course, coordinating with the Americans.
Ambassador Sinha, the Indian government had clearly advised all Indians to evacuate while commercial flights were still flying. But to be fair, nobody knew, I mean, to be fair to the Indians left there on the ground today, nobody knew that Kabul would fall so soon.
No, absolutely. Well, people are people. It's our duty to advise them, to issue advisories. And I guess this is their karma not to obey government regulations. And it happens everywhere. This is not unique to Kabul. Kabul, of course, situation is bad. But I can tell you, even today, there are people, despite hundreds of advisories, they are still staying in Libya. And we had a situation only 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when people who came back from Libya evacuated went back. So we had to take some drastic measures of actually taking back their passports when they came here, repatriated. So yes, that slight lack of discipline is there, but then government will not take a view that since you did not obey, I'll leave you to your fate. That is not the right way to go, and I'm sure government is not going to do that.
And could you explain why our aircraft is reportedly on standby at Dushanbe or landing in Dushanbe as opposed to being on the ground at the Kabul airport?
Well, it's just because of ease of reaching that place. These are military aircrafts which have a difficulty in overflying over Pakistani airspace, because otherwise, if suppose we could overfly, say, from Amritsar base, overfly Pakistan, we would have reached there in an hour. So to save time, basically, I believe that 2 aircrafts have been placed in Dushanbe at Aini. There is one, of course, is a bigger C-17. But it takes a much longer turnaround time, and which is not the window you are getting. So you have also placed smaller aircrafts, which basically ferries people to Dushanbe, and that's a 40-minute haul. So it's very quick turnaround time also. That's the reason. So that is just for operational efficiency, let's put it this way.
So lots of logistics to work around. But Ambassador, is it also a cause of concern that there could be terrorists from Pakistan-based groups like the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Haqqani network, you just mentioned them, that they're also present among the Taliban forces who are at checkposts that are en route to the Kabul airport? Is that a concern for Indians?
Yes, I think because India has been, the history is that Haqqanis have targeted India. All the attacks on the embassy and the consulates were done by the combination of Haqqanis and Lashkar-e-Taiba. It was never the Taliban. But the problem right now is that the Haqqanis have taken over all the security or the control of the checkposts in Kabul. And that's a reality. And we will have to deal with that.
But the Taliban had told India initially not to evacuate its nationals, saying that they're safe. But since then, we've seen the Taliban was seen entering our embassy, our properties there, going through contents there, reportedly taking away parked vehicles. So in that context too, are Indian nationals at any special risk or stand out compared to other nationals or those with other passports?
Well, there the risk is for everyone. But of course, Indians are always in the crosshairs of Pakistani-based terror groups, basically because they take orders from where. And I've heard these reports on they're entering the consulate in Herat and Kandahar. Kabul has been quiet. There has been absolutely, and you're right, I also heard that there were some assurances given. But then the problem is, it's right now a free-for-all in Kabul. And while the Taliban leadership and the Taliban cadres are saying what they are saying, they may or may not have control over every actor which is there. If you saw the video on the people entering the Parliament House, there is somebody who's speaking Urdu there. So obviously he's a Pakistani, he's not an Afghan. Because Afghans, when they speak to each other, it's always local Dari or Pashto. So I don't know, he was there in the parliament. I have heard reports that all the security officers, all the Afghan security officers and the intelligence officers, their homes have been ransacked and vandalized. They have been swept electronically repeatedly over the last 4 days. They are now looking for their staff, their security guards, their drivers. So yes, there are a certain set of people who face much more threat than everybody else. But then you can always be in the wrong place. You know, you would have read about the German citizen who got injured in a random firing that happened there.
So a very trying, difficult time. Lastly, Ambassador, you know, our thoughts are with those 150 Indians on the ground and their families for whom it's going to be a long night. Your, you know, last words or your thoughts for them right now?
My thoughts, of course, are with the families and the Indians, which is, I think, priority number one for the government of India, that they come back home safely without any harm. So I guess government would just do just about everything possible to do that. Obviously, we will need some patience in this because it's not a very clear picture. What's happening on the ground is absolute, complete mayhem. But the fact that our 150 people were escorted by the Taliban themselves, they were unharmed. It's a different thing that they couldn't enter the airport premises to take the flight. Says that the Taliban, at least some elements of the Taliban, are sticking to what they promised to you. Yes. But as I said, that there are different elements. Let's not presume the Taliban is one monolith and under one single chain of command. Right now, there will be a lot of mischief makers, and there will be countries which will be using different forces to create and sow this sort of a discord. Because, you know, people who have brought Taliban to this place don't want Taliban to become a monopoly on power. They would do everything possible to discredit that government also, so that their dependence on their erstwhile mentors remains. So that's a larger, deeper political game that we have to be very conscious of.
No, this is a long road ahead. But the right immediate priority is getting our Indians out.
The safety and security of our citizens is absolutely primary. And then, of course, if the Taliban would allow, there are a lot of Afghans who want to come, friends who have been partners with India, see how we can evacuate them to safety.
And that, of course, the first thing to focus on getting our Indians back home. Thank you, Ambassador, for your time. Thank you for your perspective.